Good afternoon. It's Tuesday the 14th of November 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today, once again, thank you very much for joining us, Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire.
Great to be with you, Mike.
We're just going to get straight into this, Pat. And of course, Treason May was giving her speech at the Mansion House yesterday in front of the little gold ship there, as you can see on screen, and various other opulence. Gold chairs and all kinds of stuff. And well, the Foreign Office tweeted this out. It said, Prime Minister Theresa May spoke about the importance of an international rules-based system, free markets and fair societies at this year's Lord Mayor's banquet. Well, if you want to know what fair societies are all about, have a look, have a search on the UK Column website for fairness and fairness commissions. And you'll get a clue as to what that's about. But so what did she have to say? She said, my Lord Mayor, my late Lord Mayor, Your Grace, my Lord Chancellor, Your Excellencies, my Lords, Aldermen, Sheriffs, Chief Commoner, ladies and gentlemen, as we meet here tonight, we are approaching a defining moment in the history of our nation and our place in the world. Well, that was what the Foreign Office tweeted out. This is what she tweeted out. She said, we're approaching a defining moment in the history of our nation and our place in the world. So that's clearly straight from her speech.
Copied and pasted.
Copied and pasted, but I'd like to know what this defining moment is. Maybe she's referring to Brexit. It's a bit unclear. In a period of great change, it is a period of great change, she said, and it will, of course, have its challenges. For we meet here at a moment when the international order, as we know it, the rules-based system that the United Kingdom helped to pioneer in the aftermath of the Second World War, is in danger of being eroded. A moment when some states are actively destabilizing the world order to their own ends, claiming that the rules and standards we have built and the values in which they rest no longer apply. Pat, am I imagining things? There's a level of unprecedented arrogance in this. Why should any nation, let's forget about the whole North Korea, Iran, Russia, China business. Why should any nation simply abide by a set of rules that were applied by a group of people some decades earlier? Why should they not be entitled to revisit those and perhaps work to have them changed?
Especially if those rules that were put in place, if we want to talk about the Bretton Woods system, or we want to talk about the move to the petrodollar or the secret deals which Saudi Arabia and the United States have had for years to recycle petrodollars, and prop up a fiat global reserve currency. If you want to call those as international norms, they seem to only benefit a few parties. Now, we live in a very different world. Theresa May is absolutely correct. There are a number of insurgent forces on the move from the Far East, from Asia, and from around the world. Things are not what they used to be 150 years ago, that's for certain.
Absolutely. So what else did she say? So she went on to say, so as we reach out into the world and write this new chapter of our national history, the task of a global Britain is clear: to defend the rules-based international order against irresponsible states that seek to erode it. And the comprehensive new economic partnership we seek to will underpin our shared commitment to open economies and free societies in the face of those who seek to undermine them. Chief among those today, of course, is Russia. Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea was the first time since the Second World War that one sovereign nation has forcibly taken territory from another in Europe. We can go and take territory from whoever we like, Patrick, so long as it's not in Europe.
Well, Kosovo, does that count? No. Well,
possibly,
okay.
But anyway, Russia is seeking to weaponize information.
Weaponize information.
Yes,
That's
it's deploying its state-run media organizations to plant fake stories and photoshopped images. Photoshop, Theresa, is not a verb. Can I just point that out? And photoshopped images in an attempt to sow discord in the West and undermine our institutions. So I have a very simple message for Russia, she said. We know what you're doing, and you will not succeed.
You will not succeed.
We know what you're doing, and you will not, because you underestimate the resilience of our democracies and enduring attraction of free and open societies, the commitment of Western nations to the alliances that bind us. So there you go. What do you make of that? Is that a threat?
That's interesting. So first, let's go back to the statement she made that there are countries that are destabilizing areas around the world, actively destabilizing. I can think of no a better example of a collection of countries that have been very active in destabilizing many different theaters around the world, including the Ukraine. And first and foremost is the United States, followed by its special relationship partner, the UK, followed by France and other NATO member states, but also Saudi Arabia and Israel, and Saudi particularly, pumping billions of dollars into jihadist groups in Syria and ISIS in Iraq and Syria to destabilize those two countries. And we have a special relationship with Saudi Arabia, we're told constantly, Mike, and Britain and the US providing military backing to Saudi Arabia as they illegally, in violation of all international law, committing genocide against the people of Yemen. So what exactly could Theresa May be referring to? Is Russia doing all this? Somehow I don't think so, Mike.
Well, Russia apparently is, because Russia's alleged meddling in the Catalan vote. The headlines keep coming, but we did discover something pretty disturbing here, Pat.
Yeah, well, we were going to sort of bind this with the BBC Raqqa story. Do we still have that story? Okay, the BBC, it's interesting, have just released a story today claiming that the US and the UK and the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF forces in Syria, have somehow allowed 600 ISIS fighters to escape Raqqa when it was being evacuated a few weeks ago. And the BBC released this report today, Mike. And I was floored, as many people have. The BBC have actually potentially released a truthful report in Syria. I don't know, I'm practically speechless, Mike. But yet, this is the same exact story which we reported at 21st Century Wire a couple of months ago about when Deir ez-Zor was being liberated. ISIS was being kicked out of Deir ez-Zor, not by the British military, but by the Syrian Arab Army, with the help of the Russians, Hezbollah, and Iran. Those ISIS commanders were being airlifted out of Deir ez-Zor. Okay, and so this is the coalition, in the full knowledge of the coalition, maybe actually actively airlifting them out in our choppers. Okay, now the BBC have put this Raqqa story out today, which is stunning. Okay, and if it is indeed, a good report, and we're going to applaud the BBC for that, but it really puts the US, the UK in the firing line, Mike, on this story, and the Kurds. The Kurdish SDF forces, which have been lionized as some sort of heroic force over the last few years by the Western media, since they were formed, I think, in the spring of 2016. And they're now colluding with ISIS, allowing 600 bloodthirsty, battle-hardened ISIS fighters and officers to escape Raqqa under the nose and supervision of the US-led coalition. So, Mike, this stuff that RT has been reporting for years. So is Putin now in charge of the BBC? Are the Russians meddling or manipulating the BBC's coverage that they did this Raqqa story? This is the big question. So this is a BBC newsroom, and look what we see in the back there. That's proof that the Russians are meddling in the BBC, Mike. It's right there. We've got the evidence. That's Putin in the BBC newsroom. He's controlling all of this.
Controlling it all.
This report on Raqqa is because of the Russians, Mike. They're weaponizing the information and getting it into the BBC. Can we get a statement from Theresa May about this?
I think we should.
We should.
Please post your letters to number 10 Downing Street. Now, let's move on to Brexit. Well, as we suggested yesterday, there's a bit of backtracking going on over the Henry VIII, the so-called Henry VIII powers. The government has announced a new bill. It's called the Withdrawal Agreement and Implementation Bill. And that's going to give legal standing, they say, to separation from the EU. So basically what's going on is that the howls of protest, rightly so, over the so-called Henry VIII powers, which would have allowed government ministers to make decisions and apply legislation through the use of statutory instruments, so-called secretary legislation, Parliament having no say over that. The government is now backtrack on that, and any agreement over the so-called Brexit is going to be put in front of Parliament. through this withdrawal agreement and implementation bill. This is what David Davis had to say. We've always said we will do whatever is necessary to prepare for our exit, including bringing forward further legislation. And that is exactly what we are doing. Do you believe that for a second? I do not. This is another important step, he said, that demonstrates our pragmatic approach to getting our house in order as we leave the EU. Well, people already complaining about this bitterly. Heidi Allen tweeting, pointless if we've enshrined a drop-dead date in the bill, which is the other Brexit bill, and get a deal at the 11th hour. There'll be no time, and it offers no safeguard if no deal is reached. Unacceptable. This is simply designed, Patrick, to create more chaos over Brexit within the Houses of Parliament, within the Commons, and to keep the noise level at a point where most people aren't paying attention because the media is concentrating on the noise. And let's think about why that might be, because yesterday we showed Boris Johnson's doorstep statement at the European Council Foreign Affairs meeting. And as you heard, he blustered and he talked a load of nonsense for quite some time. And then in the last 30 seconds, he mentioned defence union. Well, here is the press release that came out from the on the gov.uk website after that. And if we scroll down, there is a video clip, which is on the Foreign Office YouTube channel, of Boris's statement. And any mention of military union has been removed from this. It has been edited out, Patrick. And I find that I find that pretty spectacular because, as you said to me earlier, since when is the Foreign Office a media organisation which edits anything? The man made a statement. Why are we not able to see the statement in full on the Foreign Office website?
So that's a minister with one of the most important portfolios in government, the Foreign Secretary, head of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, made a public statement at a major public meeting, okay, with global implications, not just for Britain and for Europe, but globally. And this has been edited, Mike, by the government. This is what media organizations do. That's called propaganda when media do it, right? But when government does it, is this propaganda as well? I mean, imagine if the Russians had done this, Mike, and they've chopped off half of Putin's speech when he made some reference to Syria or Russian foreign policy. The West would then jump all over that and say, oh, this is censorship and it's Kremlin propaganda. Well, here's the British government doing it with Baza and cutting out the bit about European military unification. Mike, it's kind of an important issue. Are they trying to hide something?
I think that's exactly what they're doing. Somebody in the chat box saying that Boris needs to be edited out altogether. Well, that is a fair statement.
Many people have made that argument, actually, so yes. There's a lot of traction on that.
Okay, well, getting back onto the Mansion House speech by Theresa May, she moved on from international rules-based order to some of the conflicts that are going on around the world, and she had this to say about the Rohingya crisis.
Our efforts to respond to the desperate plight of Rohingyas, brought home to us again on our TV screens so graphically today, with heartbreaking images of young children emaciated and pleading for help. This is a major humanitarian crisis which looks like ethnic cleansing, and it is something for which the Burmese authorities, and especially the military, must take full responsibility. The UK is already the largest donor in response to this crisis, and we will continue to play a leading role in bringing the international community together, working through the UN and with regional partners to do everything possible to stop this appalling and inhuman destruction of the Rohingya people.
So, Patrick, we're going to pour more money in. We've been pouring money in already, and of course that money has made a huge difference because more people have been leaving the region. So is that money going to help, or is it going to cause the problem that's there? We're going to put more money in there. We're going to continue to step up our efforts to respond to the desperate plight of the Rohingya. It's now a major humanitarian crisis, which looks like ethnic cleansing.
Which looks like ethnic cleansing. That's an interesting choice of words by Theresa May, Mike. She said it looks like ethnic cleansing, and then before that, she was talking about the images coming through our TV screen. So again, we have a situation with what is the government reacting to here? Are they reacting to images on YouTube or TV screens? This is what the United States was reacting to when it launched a cruise missile strike after an alleged chemical weapons attack by the Syrian government in Khan Shaykhun and Idlib at the beginning of April 2017. The U.S. government was reacting. It engaged in an act of war against another sovereign state based on a couple of YouTube videos. So what exactly is Theresa May saying, that foreign policy can be based on what news coverage from Al Jazeera or the BBC? What's actually going on in Myanmar, and didn't we absolutely cover this?
We did
2 months ago with our analyst Garrett O'Coleman.
That's right. And now the Burmese army saying that the Rohingya ethnic cleansing suggestion is fake news, according to the Times. Do you think that's the thing that concerns me about this? Is it is an extremely complex issue, as we covered a number of weeks ago, as you say, with Garrett O'Coleman. What concerns me most about this is the media coverage of it and the way that is playing into a political narrative. And so in that sense, I think the Burmese army is probably right on the money here, suggesting that it's fake news.
It could very well be. It's important to look at all the different media coverage and also check the analysis as well that's coming out about that media coverage. But so many times, Mike, we know that the mainstream media, the Western mainstream media, likes to get a narrative, and everybody stays on message right across the print, right across the broadcast, and all the online journals as well. They stick to that narrative. Look how they did this in Syria from day one. They said, oh, it's an Arab Spring, the peaceful protests and so forth. Later we find out that that's not actually what happened in any of these places in Syria, and that this was actually very well coordinated. It was violent, it was armed, it had a extremist religious bent to it, but yet despite all this, for years, Mike, years, the entire mainstream media, including the BBC, were portraying this as this sort of moderate rebels and the sort of freedom and loving democracy bands of student protesters and whatnot just want a chance at democracy in Syria. And we find out later that there are hundreds of thousands of armed violent terrorists holding whole communities hostage in Syria. Now the truth is coming out, of course, but the mainstream media have been mischaracterizing that conflict for years. And I think the same potential in a place like Myanmar with the Rohingya crisis, there is that potential that the media would engage in the same sort of groupthink on the issue because they like that narrative sells, and it might sort of coincide with the geopolitical interests of the United States and the major other Western powers, including Britain, to possibly disrupt Chinese development programs. And there is actually major Chinese development programs in Myanmar to connect China with a coastal port and also oil and gas projects, and all part of the One Belt, One Road initiative, which is being heavily financed and promoted by Beijing at the moment. So could this Myanmar crisis play into that series of events and the power conflicts that exist between East and West? I would say it's a high possibility.
Well, coming back to the Middle East, Patrick, and we were talking yesterday about Lebanon, Saudi, and all the stuff that's going on around there. But what's going on with the Peshmerga?
The Peshmerga, what's interesting, this is the Kurdish militias, which have been kind of characterized as these great freedom fighters by the Western media for so many years, fighting ISIS and so forth. So this is a report here we've just picked up from Iraqi television. And so what's happened, the Peshmerga, while ISIS was being driven from some of these cities like Mosul in Iraq and in northern Iraq, the Peshmerga in this case had done a deal, signed some sort of private peace treaty with ISIS to allow them to sort of escape, basically, hundreds of fighters. Now these 300 here were arrested. But so they basically gave the Iraqi intelligence services information, as far as I can see from this story, that the Peshmerga were colluding with ISIS, Mike. So this is the same Peshmerga that are championed by the United States, working with the U.S. military and so forth. So we also see similar stories that have come out with this BBC Raqqa report, The Dirty Secrets of Raqqa, which was run by the BBC today. Same thing, the SDF Kurdish forces and the Peshmerga are also in the picture there as well. This isn't the first time I've heard this, Mike. This is in the Iraqi justice system right now, this story. Okay, this is being heard in courts right now. Have you heard anything about this, Mike, in the Western press?
No, but of course it wasn't too long ago that Boris Johnson was getting very up close and personal with them.
Well, here's Boris in Iraq with the Peshmerga hanging out and, oh, look, doing a little target practice in his Jeeves and Hawks shirt, or Turnbull and Asher, sorry, Boris, and his jacket there, which is probably going to get a little dusty there on the elbow. But there he is posing with guns with the Peshmerga. And so we have there's quite a lot of testimony, especially in Iraq, of the Peshmerga are not the saintly, all-seeing and dancing freedom-fighting militia that the Western media has characterized them to be for so many years, that they might actually be also part of the problem in some cases, in some of these instances where ISIS have been occupying towns in Iraq, where the Matador defense of the town by the Peshmerga, all of a sudden they disappear and ISIS takes over. We heard this report so many times in Iraq as well. And also perhaps in Syria, we might hear more about these sort of similar reports. So what does Boris Johnson as Foreign Secretary have to say now about the Peshmerga? Should this issue be looked into? Should there be some investigations, maybe some hearings into, what is the relationship between British intelligence, U.S. intelligence, and the Peshmerga? And can we draw any conclusions from this collusion with ISIS? These are good questions. I think these are worth asking, Mike.
Aside from ourselves, Patrick, one media organization which is asking some questions at least is RT. And in the United States, RT seems to be being forced to register as a foreign agent. They're describing this as a horrendous blow to press freedom. Now, earlier on, I was comparing this to what Russia has done with foreign-backed NGOs in Russia, making them register as foreign agents in Russia. And I was asking you if you thought that this was simple retaliation for this, but you think there's more to it than that?
Well, I don't think you could look at it that way, but I don't think you can compare the activity of some of these NGOs overseas with a media organization. There is no hidden agenda with RT. Everything which they research and report, it gets aired, it gets put out on the airwaves, it goes on to YouTube. It is available to be scrutinized, Mike, and I have not seen any examples in any of the Western finger-waving and condemnations about any untruthful Russian reporting from RT and Sputnik. These they're run by humans, so they're not infallible. They do make mistakes, but I think if you actually tally up the sort of pedestrian mistakes of an RT or Sputnik, I can only see one or two instances that have been pulled up, most of them incredibly minor and pretty trivial. But if you want to categorize the absolute fabrication of major news stories, Mike, not just the 2016 election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, I mean the laundry list between the New York Times, the Washington Post, CBS, NBC, CNN, and Vice News and BBC and all of these news outlets, and with Syria, with Al Jazeera, Libya, Al Jazeera, CNN, the BBC, the Times, the Guardian. I mean, you're talking about absolute fake news. The White Helmets, that whole mythology that is spun up in the media, Bana of Aleppo. I mean, you're talking about some serious, major, multi-billion-dollar propaganda campaigns, Mike. And to somehow say that RT is doing anything like this, those are all provable examples I just mentioned, Mike, but I can't find anything in RT's reporting that approaches even the same. I mean, if it's propaganda, then what do we call what we're producing in the West, Mike? Should we make a new category? Is propaganda just nothing now? make a new category for what the West is producing in terms of disinformation and lies to sort of sell various wars and humanitarian interventions. I don't really know what to say, Mike. It's pretty obvious.
Indeed. Well, look, let's move on to the increasing sex scandals that are going on. This is Daisy Goodwin, a television producer, saying that she was groped by a 10 Downing Street official. None of these reports ever getting close to any of the real disturbing activity that goes on via the House of Commons and so on. But in the United States, Patrick, it's getting even more interesting. We've got George H.W. Bush, I believe, is it now 6 people making accusations against him now?
Yeah, a 6th woman has come forward to accuse the former U.S. President George H.W. Bush of some sort of groping. And the first of which that came forward was actually a fairly high-profile person. She was an actor. This was in a sort of during a public photo. And so poor old George W. Bush here at the tender age of 90-something in a wheelchair, and he's having to field some of these accusations. So this is the president's off. Go ahead.
In fairness, he's had to face some stronger accusations in the past, which he generally has ignored.
Well, he has like a lot of his activities as a CIA director, which coincided with a number of high-profile assassinations and other orders overthrowing governments, and some people have even put him into the frame with the whole JFK affair as well during that time. So yes. Certainly he's got an interesting past. The news in the Telegraph today is that Joe Biden claims that Barack Obama repeatedly discouraged him for running for U.S. president, and there could be many possible reasons for this. This is one that you highlighted, that Biden had admitted post 9/11 meeting with hijackers financier. Of course, that was coming from We Are Change. So was that the reason, or was this the reason? Because creepy Uncle Joe, this is a problem, and we're just going to let the video from the Washington Post here play, because watch Joe Biden. He's signaling Ash Carter's wife to come in here for a photo. And there he's putting his hands on his shoulders. And if you watch the Joe Biden videos on the internet,
you just need to search for creepy Uncle Joe.
Creepy Joe on YouTube. And look at this. This is Ash Carter giving a speech, checking to see if his wife is okay. Obviously, any person would, and with someone like Biden there. And here goes Joe. And this is at a major national press conference. It's just
Ash Carter feels the need to put his hand on her shoulder to reassure her, because she is in close proximity to this guy. And in some of these other videos that I've seen of creepy Uncle Joe, there seems to be an awareness that there's a problem here.
There is, and so this isn't something that I don't think people are not aware of in Washington. It's kind of one of these known secrets that no one really talks about. So that's the vice president, and if Barack Obama discouraged him from running for president, I would say I would give props to Barack Obama for doing that.
But there's a certain level of hypocrisy here, because Joe Biden apparently was trying to raise awareness of sexual assault claims.
That's right. So he was used in the last year of Obama's presidency to front all of these national campaigns about sexual harassment and sexual assault. No means no. All these famous videos that Biden fronted while he was vice president. So I think it's kind of interesting. I mean, you know, you can draw whatever conclusions you would like from any of these videos of Biden, but certainly
they are quite disturbing, because they mostly involve children.
Yeah. So the main theme here, Mike, is that in high positions of power in politics and in entertainment, there seems to be, quite a lot of this abuse of power and so forth by these officials. And so, yeah, we're probably going to see, this isn't the last of it, Mike. I think a lot more is going to be coming out in the next.
Well, look, I think for more to come out, that's really down to the public to keep pushing on this issue. And clearly there's an attempt to provide a smokescreen for some of the other activity that's been going on. If we're going to sit back and let that smokescreen hide the truth from us, I think we get what we deserve in that case. We've got to keep the pressure on and try to try to get more of this out into the public. You know, Jimmy Savile was an opportunity, but this stuff continues to rumble on.
The Harvey Weinstein sort of bomb, which exploded a few weeks ago. But you know, on one hand, Mike, there's a lot of good cannon fodder here for the mainstream press, and these are important issues. But on the other hand, there are also a lot of other things happening around the world, which the Weinstein headlines are pushing out.
Yeah.
There's some major geopolitical and major power shifts going on in the world. So we've got to be careful not to spend too much time on those stories, and also look at the other stories as well.
Okay, now back here in the UK, we've been talking about big society for a long time, and social impact and change agents and all this kind of stuff. Well, the government has clearly decided that there's not enough happening in that sphere, and we need to be encouraging a lot more change in the country and investing in change agents. And so this is a new independent review, which is setting out how government and the financial services industry can work together to build a culture of social impact investment in the UK. So they want a culture to build. They want investment going into certain projects. On screen, we've got Elizabeth Corley, who's chair of Allianz Global Investors, and a couple of other people. And here is the report itself, Growing a Culture of Social Impact Investing in the UK. The group found that there is a growing interest among individuals for their investments to have a positive impact in society, but it's not clear what the definition of positive impact is in this case. We're looking at the investment into various big society type projects. It's not necessarily going to result in a positive outcome.
No, but what these are, Mike, are sort of industries within industries that have sort of exist for their own benefit. And this is a term you hear a lot to critique this change agent, change management obsession, which is now rifling through institutions and businesses around the UK, Europe, and also in America, is that it's become change for change's sake. In other words, there's a whole industry that has sprouted up for change management persons who really don't know a whole lot about anything in particular, other than they know how to change things. And so there's a laundry list of things that need to be changed every quarter, and maybe this might explain why the NHS and other institutions are having problems delivering services efficiently, even though they've invested millions and millions of pounds into change management and change agents across the board, as per NGOs as well. So we need to maybe step back and look at this. What are we looking at here? Is this sort of a corporate cult that has just kind of gotten out of control, Mike? And it's not really serving the public or improving services or products, but what it is, it's creating a whole industry for people in change management. This is a question that a lot of critics are asking right now.
Well, one of the major victims for this, of course, is the National Health Service, as you say. And so do get onto the UK Column website and dig out the article, Towards a Million Change Agents, if you have not read that yet, because that, of course, was the stated intention, to have 1 million change agents working within the National Health Service. And then you ask, why does the National Health Service need to have a continually rising budget? It's not for healthcare, it's for the change agenda. And you know, this needs to be stamped on pretty firmly.
And if this is infiltrated like the Foreign Commonwealth Office, or this is infiltrated major government departments and universities and things which it has, then that might explain, Mike, the sort of dysfunctionality of foreign policy. And what we're seeing, this chaos that we see around the world, might have something to do with this sort of invasion of the change agent, or the common purpose agenda as well. So these are things that people need to take a close look at and find out, hey, what's happening behind the scenes at these institutions? Why are things not functioning as well as maybe they have in the past?
Yeah. Okay, well, look, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much, Patrick, for joining us. Thank you for joining us. We will be back at the same time, 1 p.m. tomorrow. Brian will be back in the office, so we'll see you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.